Well, thank you very much for this very kind introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure, it is my honor to be with you today. And I'm very thankful to President Chikong Kang, who invited me to make this opening speech for this very important meeting today. As Ambassador Kuisa mentioned, I mean, the Asian Forum on Enterprise for Society is a renowned venue for dialogue about a subject which is more and more being discussed everywhere in the world, which is corporate social responsibility. It is a reflection of an increased perception of the evolving role of business, not only as it was in the past as an economic factor, but also as a social partner in building a better, hopefully more inclusive and a sustainable world. So when I received this invitation, I looked, of course, at the theme, and I was quite intrigued, I must say. Boosting innovation and inclusiveness together. This title provokes some considerations. Let me start with innovation. As it was mentioned, one of the prizes I appreciated most in my life, which I received, was the Schumpeter Prize. The Schumpeter Prize is given to the entrepreneur who has mostly done disruptive innovation in his career. And this is now about almost 20 years ago. And the reason why I got this, because I think during my career, I disrupted several times markets or communication. If I think about coffee, think about before Nestlé started, there was roast and ground coffee. And then we disrupted the coffee business by the invention of the soluble coffee. And then again, the pure soluble coffee with the freeze-dried coffee. And then came the next step, which was individual consumption with the invention of Nespresso. Today, a business of several billions of Swiss francs. So we constantly interrupted the normal business with new products, with new technologies, etc. But also trade. I was the first, I think even in the world, who launched an e-commerce long before the internet has received. This was interactive on a television screen, and we made 2 shops in Switzerland as a test. And it became the beginning of an e-commerce company which still exists today in Switzerland. Or in communication, in 1987, I made the front page of the Wall Street Journal because I said the mass media communication is something of the past. We are going to move to a one-on-one communication. And this was like, wait a moment, it's not possible. Well, later on it became possible. And today we have again a new revolution in communication, which is moving from the one-to-one to the many-to-many. And this thanks to the social medias and things like this. So you can see in this disruptive interaction has happened in the past and will happen in the future even more so. If you look at the business environment in general, I think renovation and continuous innovation has always been fundamental for the continuous success. But let me dare to say, it's not enough. If you look at the Fortune 500 companies, only 30 years ago, more than half of them don't not exist anymore. And believe me, they all have done innovation and renovation. But perhaps they have not looked sufficiently enough in disruptive innovation. And the reason for this is that the world is in a very dramatic and disruptive change. And the biggest difference, I would say, is the speed with which those changes are coming upon us. And The next step, I dare to say, and I might delve to this a little bit later, is that slowly but surely technology is overpowering humans' intellectual capabilities to understand, to have the time to react, and to digest what is happening in technological disruptions. Just take as an example ChatGPT. A year ago, or even at the beginning of this year, if I had talked about ChatGPT, most people would have looked at me and saying, well, that's something which will come in the future. We have heard about this thing so many times. Well, within 3 months, it has become an issue of the masses. Almost all of us today have a ChatGPT. Now, this happened suddenly. And the interesting thing is, when you talk to the inventor of ChatGPT, they will tell you that, to be honest, we don't even know what is happening inside of the hardware box. And that was one of the reasons why so many in the Silicon Valley were saying, let's make a stop on technological development because we cannot follow up with what they are bringing. So all of those things start with technological disruptions. But technological disruptions also have an enormous impact on the underlying changes in how we live and how we think and how we behave. Now, historically, disruptions happened over a very long period. The first big disruption, which was, of course, from the hunter and gathering society to an agricultural society, and then later on to urbanization, well, this took thousands of years. The next one, which was industrialization, it all started with a small steam engine. Really, that was the disruptive thing. Nobody had thought about the impact that this would have. Well, this took 100 of years until the next one came, which was then the electricity. And then it took about 40 years, and then the next one came, which was then the internet. And now it goes faster and faster and faster and faster. And almost every day you can wake up and have a look, and you find another disruptive thing happening. And we have, as a humankind, as human beings, we have real problems to follow and not to lose control of this development. And one of the main reasons is that life, the life as we know it, the organic life on Earth, it's a chemical process. Artificial intelligence and what we are creating now, and the new children that we are creating, is electronic. And the difference between organic life and electronic life is a speed accelerator of thousands of times faster than what chemical life can do. This is the issue. And that's the issue why there is a danger that the disruption, technological disruption, might get out of control. So you have to ask yourself, how can we react to this, if we still have time to react? Well, let me tell you one story, which the Swiss government, to my big surprise, because, you know, Swiss governments are not known very much for being very fast and very forward-looking, but in this special case, they did, and they were wondering what was going on in the future and how can we intervene today on a multilateral basis in order to harness and to anticipate what technology will bring us. And they decided to create a foundation which is called Geneva Science and Diplomatic Anticipator. And for whatever obscure reason, they appointed me as chairman of this thing. So what we are doing in this foundation, which by the way is absolutely open, transparent, so you can just go to your internet and you look Chester and you will see everything what we are doing. What we are doing is we created basically a scientific forum, a diplomatic forum, and an impact forum. The scientific forum is composed of about 4,000 scientists from all over the world, and we are asking them what they are doing, what they are cooking in their laboratories, to tell us what's going to be the impact of their work of today in 5 years, in 10 years, or in 25 years. That was quite a revolution, because normal scientists, they only worry about what's happening today and what will be the reaction tomorrow. So when we forced them to think about what could your work has an impact on society and life in the next 5, 10, 25 years, in the beginning they were quite astonished. Now, we then afterwards reassemble all of this into one document, which is a Geneva Scientific Breakthrough Radar, where you have basically on 4 technology platforms all what is happening in today's world and the impact that this can have. It's a unique document, never existed before, being very much appreciated by the scientists themselves, but also by the political world, of course, universities, etc. What we are then doing is we are taking this radar and we confront it with the politicians, the diplomats of the world, in order to see what would be the framework that is necessary so that those scientific breakthroughs become an issue for the good of the world and not only for the bad. So I give you one example. One of the technology platforms that we were working with the scientists is quantum and quantum computing. The impact of quantum computing is going to be enormous, again, because of the speed. I mean, what a quantum computer is thousands of times faster again as a normal computer. So speed is going, and acceleration and disruption is going to be very big. The issue is that the development of quantum computing, for example, is in the hands of 4 commercial companies and in the hands of about 3 to 4, perhaps India, the 4th country. So if we don't do anything, this powerful tool is going to be in the hand either in 3, 4 commercial companies, like today, social media, with an enormous political power, or it's being concentrated in the hands of 2 or 3, 4 countries which are using it as a technological neocolonialism. We want to avoid this, because I think this technology can really help us to accelerate, for example, the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN. This would be, I think, the right thing. So out of these considerations and in discussion with governments, universities, scientists, diplomats, we decided to create an open quantum institute. An open quantum institute which is not going to do research and development. What's going to do is to create a platform for everybody in the world that you can start to work on applications of the technology. I mean, if you think about the iPhone, the most important part of the iPhone today are the applications. And the same thing is going to happen with quantum. The most important thing is going to be the applications. But how do you want to develop an application if you don't have access to a quantum computer? So that's exactly what we are creating, an open quantum institute, which will be located in the CERN in Switzerland. So this is just an example on a macro level on how you can anticipate, or you have to anticipate, in order to make decisions that you be able to keep up with technological disruption. Now, you can ask me the same question, how to handle disruptive innovation, of course, at the company level. And there are a lot of books out there which can help you. I'm not going to go into details here. I've just, on my way down here, I was reading a new one, which is just coming out, which is called The Dance of Disruption and Creation. And I mention it because it is written by two Indian ex-CEOs and professors at University, London Business School and in India, Fernando Nandkishore and Neeraj Chandra. And I must say it is one of the most practical books on how to tackle a really disruptive innovation. Let me come back to your second word, which I found in your theme of today. And this is inclusion. In 2014, the Pope Francis invited me, to my big surprise, I must say, because I am not a practicing religious person, but he invited me to come to the Vatican and to spend 2 days with 40 cardinals, bishops, university professors, to think about a future form of capitalism that was in preparation for his Encyclica, which he was then publishing about a year or 2 years later. Now, the first question, of course, is what is capitalism? If you want to talk about the future, at least we should be clear what it is. And basically, it is an economic system which is based on the private ownership of means of production and their operation for profit. It includes capital accumulation. It includes very clearly property rights, market prices, fair competition. And in order to achieve those parts, it also needs regulation. There is no unregulated capitalism by definition. But the interesting thing is, it's a degree of regulation which decides and defines the nature of the different forms of capitalism. So you have the laissez-faire capitalism, which is on the, I would say, the one extreme of the whole thing. You have social capitalism, you have welfare capitalism, stakeholder capitalism, which is the form that the World Economic Forum is promulgating. And you have on the other side, you have state capitalism, which has been developing over the last couple of years in a very, very efficient manner, as we can see. Now, capitalism per se has always been a human activity. John Adam perceived it as a human capitalism. And I quote one of his letters, and he said, "I must study politics and wars, that our children may have the liberty to study themselves mathematics and philosophy, in order to give right to their children to study painting, poetry, and music." So the capitalism, like it was conceived in the beginning, was not the maximization of profit for nothing, just for profit. It was to increase the well-being of the population so that those can then afterwards move up on the values of the Maslow pyramid and getting out of the lowest level than they were and going up, and that's at the end coming to what he was saying. Hopefully my grandchildren can study painting, poetry, and music. So what came out after 2 days of discussion in the Vatican was what he afterwards included in this encyclica. Basically, instead of money putting at the center of capitalism, we should put the humans and the human need at the center of economic activity. And he calls this the inclusive capitalism. That was the outcome. So you see, inclusive has a very important meaning, it has a very important word, and I think it is very important for the future of our systems. Now, the main criticism that we hear of the money capitalism, like I call it, which is this only money is important, it is Friedman's definition that the only responsibility of a CEO is to create money and to maximize the profit. Well, the criticism is very clearly, first of all, power is in the hands of very few capitalists. Prioritization of profit over the social good, over natural resources, over environment. And this type of capitalism is the engine of inequality, of corruption, and social and economic instabilities. And I must say, I fully agree with that. I think those are the pitfalls of the pure capitalism, and those negative effects demand a stronger regulation. And therefore, as I mentioned before, if I go from the one extreme of the laissez-faire to the state, I think somewhere in the middle ground is where the future of capitalism will be, and if we call it intensive capitalism, that's fine with me. Because we should never forget, as much as I understand the criticism, as much I also underline the positive power of capitalism, if it is well channeled, as the best value creator that we have ever invented, which has taken out 2 billion of people out of extreme poverty over the last couple of years, and we have achieved an unthinkable of standard of living in the more developed countries. Now, your theme ends with the word together. Together, I understand as a business community, because that's what we are here today. I think to overcome the pitfalls of capitalism, which I mentioned before, we cannot only maximize profit, but we have to a much broader social responsibility. And this so broader social responsibility has been the beginning of what we call today the corporate social responsibility movement. And again, this is part of why we are here. Now, at the World Economic Forum, we dedicated about 12 years or 15 years ago one full session of Davos, 5 days, on corporate social responsibility. And after 5 days, there were about 6 times the amount of people that we have today, 3,000 people in the hall, and everybody agreed that corporate social responsibility is extremely important. We have to give back to society. So I stood up at the very end of the day, and I say, look, my friends, I don't agree with you. I don't have to give back to society nothing. I have not been stealing from society. If you have been taking away something of society which you shouldn't have done, that's a different story. And I think this is very important, because as long as you see corporate social responsibility a pillow for your good sleep, you have a good conscience, okay? I have given $1 million here, and I've given another 100,000 there, and I have bought in my peace because I have given back to society. I think you don't understand what's the real role of business in society. So I developed at that point of time, after the meeting we had, I went back, I started to think about this, And I developed a concept which I called creating shared value. Creating shared value is nothing else but taking corporate social responsibility embedded in your business strategy. And there were two fundamental thoughts. The first thought is that the economic system is only a subsystem of society. It's not the number one system of society. And therefore, it always has to be subdued to the overall society. It's a society which decides which economic activities are we allowed to exercise. When I was younger, we had half of the world where we could not exercise economic activities. Half of the world was in the hands of communists, and they don't want to have private enterprise. Okay? It's only recently that we have the right to have activities. And this right which society gives us, gives the economic system, also includes an obligation towards the society. So that was the first fundamental thought. And the second one is that sustainable growth cannot come from the limitless exploitation of natural resources. And one of the worst exploitation of natural resources is water. Now, I could start to talk about the water for quite a long time, but I will prevent it. So for me, creating shared value is the creation of value through your business activity for society, which allows you to be there, for your shareholder who gives you the money, which allows you to do it, and for nature, because without nature, you will not be able to transform anything. Okay? And this should be built on inclusivity, sustainability, and equality. That's in a condensed form, creating shared value. Now, I'm many times asked, how did you implement creating shared value in a company? Well, at Nestlé, I must say, when I started to talk about it, I didn't come into a void. In 1923, Nestlé was bankrupt. Up to there, it was being run by a family. It was not Nestlé, by the way. Nestlé sold his participation 5-6 years after he created the company. It was an American company, the Page Brothers. And in 1923, as consequences of World War I, the company went bankrupt. And it was refloated basically by 3 banks, and they put in, for the very first time, conditions to the refloat. And the first condition was that you create value at the long term. Don't run for short-term profit. The second one was we want to have a very sound financial base. We want to be a AAA financially. And we want to have a leverage which is very low. Although this economic profit has an impact, but they don't work. We want to have security, safety, and sustainability. So that was the one thing, why we were always long-term oriented. The second one was that our business, with the specificity of our business, we see closeness to the full value chain, from the agriculture, from the cattle breeding, up to the consumers. We understood very well that in order to do that, you need to have long-term investments. You cannot in agriculture have short-term things. You cannot have in cattle breeding. You have to wait until the cattle brings a young cattle. It takes 2-3 years and things like this. So long-term thinking also came from the specificity of our business. Now, how to make this creating shared value a reality? Well, I would say there is not a big difference to any other strategy change that you want to do. I have always thought that the first thing is bring your thoughts on a paper. or today on a screen, whatever. I still believe the paper is better, but anyway. Put it on a paper. Share it with your executives. Get the feedback, get the impact. What is the criticism? What is open? You have to have an open discussion about it. Refine it afterwards, because they will tell you a lot of things which you have forgotten, you have not taken into consideration. And present it then to the board of directors, but not as a separate document. Present it as a part of your strategy review, which you're doing anyway, most companies at least once a year. It should become part of a business strategy and not part of a corporate social responsibility, public affair department's issue. Okay? It's inherent to the business strategy. So in the strategic review, you are going to review anyway the why and the what of the company. Why do we exist? What is our purpose? This question is at the floor of any discussion. And then comes the other question, the how and the who. Who do we create value for? How are we going to implement this? What are our core values? Once you take it into this environment, your business strategy is already framed, and creating shared value will come out almost automatically. So at Nestlé we said, summarize it in what is our purpose. It is good food, good life. It's very simple once you get it down there. I mean, we are here in order to create a good life for the big part of the population. And then how we do it? Through creating shared value. So if you want, it's a yin and the yang of the Nestlé, the how and the why. And then the next steps are relatively easy. I didn't stop at the board of directors. I went to the shareholders. I presented the whole thing at the next shareholder general meeting, and I demanded a change of the bylaws. And I changed the bylaws by specifying that the purpose of this company is to create value, long-term sustainable value for society, for shareholders, and for the environment. And I got an approval of the change by 99%, which was even for me quite a big surprise. But the consequences of these changes were that if now, when I went to my financial analysts meeting all over the world, they were asking me, what is the quarterly result? I said, I have no idea, I don't care. Because we are only talking about long-term profitability increases. So don't come with me on pressure on short-term. And if you don't like it, why did you invest? You didn't read the bylaws. If you want to go to somebody who delivers you short-term, go to another company. See, the strength of having changed the bylaws is enormously vis-à-vis the financial world. The other thing is internally very important. I mean, you have to review the internal processes. One example is CapEx. Well, in the good old time before creating shared value, my financial justification or justification, any CapEx or acquisition or everything, normally finished with a financial consideration. Return on invested capital is going to be 25%, the break-even point is going to be in 2 years or something like this. Well, I said, fine, that's still good, but I want to see now in the justification document, what is the value you have created for society, okay? What is the difference if you put a factory somewhere out in the countryside or you put it close to a city? It has a huge difference on the value you create for society. So by forcing the internal regulations to include the question of what is the value you're creating for society with this business strategy, you're implementing it and it becomes part of the DNA. And of course, it's always good to have external recognition, especially if the newspapers talks about it or if independent recognized institution does it. So I talked with Michael Porter and with Michael Kramer from Harvard University, and they wrote then Harvard University reviews articles about creating shared value, and then afterwards they created a worldwide creating shared value forum, which is now existing more than 43 years. But it's now them, and it is their name which gives credibility to the concept of creating shared value. So let me come to conclusions. I think if I look around, if I listen around, I think there's a general sentiment among business community, and this one is of confusion. There are too many changes. There's too much disruptions. Everything is going too fast. Everything is too complex. So what is true today is not anymore true tomorrow. And yet, and perhaps because of this speed of disruption, most businesses today are focused on optimizing within the current context. Yet, they are insufficiently focused on anticipation and revisiting the fundamental nature of their existing business model. And in order to do this, you need to have a strong leadership, and you need to have a strong culture. The more we have a volatile world, the more you need to have a strong corporate culture, and you have to have strong leadership. Many times I'm being asked, what is culture? Well, for me, it's a very simple definition. Culture is how people behave and what they do when nobody looks at them. That's culture. Now, leadership, many books have been written, and I could make a full speech on leadership, but I'm not going to do. What I'm saying is that leadership in what we call the VUCA world, the volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous world, has for me only two fundamental tasks. The first one is to manage the current business, to keep it fit, competitive, sustainable, and relevant to your clients. And the second one is to prepare the organization for continuous and ever more disruptive change by continuously anticipating the things that will come, but also the things that might come. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it sounds easy and simple, but believe me, I know it is not. It demands a visionary and a courageous leadership. Thank you for your attention.